The Nazis were some of the worst people we've ever seen, but they also knew how to build a brand. Joseph Goebbels, a top Nazi and Reich minister of propaganda, knew the importance of how things looked on the outside. He knew that uniforms that are in great shape and make the person wearing them look as tall, wide, and scary as possible make a big impact. Goebbels wanted the Nazis to have a strong brand, which is why he made sure their outfits were so different. Never before had the aggressiveness of the military and the power of the fashion business come together so well. The British editor of GQ was fired in 1999 because he put a Nazi on a list of the best-dressed people of the 20th century. He praised Erwin Rommel, who was known as the Desert Fox. Rommel was a Nazi field general who was in charge of colonizing northern Africa during World War II. Legend has it that Rommel led his men from the front, even though he still looked dapper. This makes me wonder why the Nazis were so stylish, to the point where they were even praised for it. Masters of branding. When it came to clothes and decorations, the uniform was what everyone in Germany wore. Brian L. Davis is an expert on uniforms and a scholar. He describes 240 different ways that people dressed during the Third Reich. The appeal to male vanity meant that every man in the Reich, including Nazi party leaders like Adolf Hitler, had to wear a uniform. Bernhard Teicher thinks back on his time as a young soldier in Nazi Germany and writes, "Of course, we were provided uniforms. Ideally, everybody in the Nazi Reich should have worn a uniform." The Nazi Party wanted Germans to have the same ideas about everything, even down to wearing clothes with the Nazi sign on them. Furthermore, Adolf Hitler considered himself an artist, not a politician. How can we fail to see in this phenomenon a sign of artistry, is a question posed by Thomas Mann in his essay Brother Hitler, published in 1938. Between 1933 and 1945, the Nazi regime was dominated by this artistry and aesthetic in all spheres of life. The Reich Ministry of Public Enlightenment and Propaganda used this kind of artistic skill a lot to come up with and use new ways to spread propaganda to support Third Reich ideas. The Nazis weren't the first or last people to use propaganda, but their use of political marketing was a new way to spread Nazi politics, philosophy, and militarism to the people of Germany, Europe, and the rest of the world. Almost right away, the Nazi outfits became a big part of what it meant to be a Nazi. Not only did Nazi uniforms encourage uniformity, but they were also beautifully made, intricately decorated, and perfectly fitted. They inspired both fear and respect, which helped the Reich achieve its goals without saying a word. Clothing as a propaganda machine. It's not a coincidence that historians don't talk about clothes when they talk about how Nazi propaganda affected people. Joseph Goebbels, a Nazi publicist, said, "Propaganda is useless the moment we find out about it." This is a famous quote. There is power in the anonymity of the uniform. The uniform was an important part of the Nazi propaganda machine because, unlike posters, movies, and talks, it was always there but never spoke. This quote from Goebbels says it all about how the Third Reich outfits were used for propaganda. But the Nazi uniform may have been the most successful, for the same reason that Goebbels mentioned. Neither Germans nor people from other countries knew that the Nazis they saw were walking ads for the Reich. Even though these clothes didn't say a word, they said a lot about the government because they were both stylish and scary. One of the main ways the Third Reich spread its messaging was through uniforms, which have since become an iconic part of Nazi style. In a biological sense, the bites that people got from the Nazi outfits spread the disease from one person to another. In the same way that fleas spread disease, the Nazis used clothing to spread their ideas of racial dominance and militarism. The Nazi idea of a people's community, or Volksgemeinschaft, and the idea of Gleichschaltung, or social harmony, were both shown in the common use of uniforms. It helped get rid of individuality and level differences between Germans, making the way for a society where everyone did what they were told. Coco Chanel's shocking complicity. When Hitler's troops came to Europe, Chanel was doing well for herself. Coco, as she was better known, was the first person to make the classic black dress popular in a tighter style. But the strange thing is that the Nazi rule of France sped up her rise to fame. Chanel didn't fight or run away from the Nazis, so she basically accepted their power. She dated a German man named Hans Gunther von Dinklag, and used him to move up in her spy job and help the Third Reich recruit people. Chanel wasn't rejected for what she did. Instead, she quickly became known as the best French fashion designer of the time. She didn't waste any time in trying to set up her rule. Even though the Chanel name got bad press, the claims that she had ties to the Third Reich actually helped the business. A new account of the French fashion designer that came out in the US tries to prove that she worked as a Nazi spy during World War II under the code name Westminster. Hal Vaughan, an American who was stationed in Paris and wrote Sleeping with the Enemy, Coco Chanel's Secret War, says that the designer and Hans Gunther von Dinklag, a German officer, were spies who went to Madrid and Berlin. The book also says that Chanel had very negative ideas about Jews. Chanel was shown to be more by Vaughan than merely a Nazi sympathizer and accomplice. She was a numbered member of the Nazi Party and the German military's intelligence service, Abwehr, Alfred A. Knopf, the publisher, stated. During the war, she undoubtedly dated a member of the German aristocracy. Although Chanel knew Baron von Dinklag before the war and he was English via his mother, the time period was not ideal for a love tale with a German, the Chanel Corporation claimed as a response in a statement. The fashion house also denied that the designer was anti-Semitic, arguing that if Chanel had been so, she never would have associated with Jews or the wealthy Rothschilds. But the book says that Chanel, whose designs made her one of the most important people in fashion, went on missions with Dinklag and others to help recruit new agents ready to work for Germany. It uses documents from English, French, German, and American archives to back up its claims. The paper shows that her Abwehr agent number was F7124 and that her code name was Westminster, after the Duke of Westminster, with whom she had an affair. The involvement of Boss. Adolf Hitler wore a standard-issue uniform, but the rest of the Nazi leadership liked to wear the flashy black leather jackets with brass buttons and gilded epaulets that became popular during the punk and BDSM times of the 1970s. Whether or not the people who wear them now agree with Nazi ideas, high-end designers and trends like swastika kawaii have made Nazi symbols famous. Hugo Ferdinand Boss, the founder of the German fashion house Boss, is known for making the clothes that Hitler's early bodyguards, the Nazi Party Army, and the Hitler Youth wore. When Boss joined the Nazi Party in 1931, he only had 6 sewing machines. Almost instantly, his sales went up by a lot. Boss had over 180 slaves and POWs from different countries working for him until 1946, when he was punished harshly for his Nazi deeds and had to close his business. After his sentence was thrown out on appeal, he probably killed himself in 1948. Slave labor for high-end fashion. Hedwig Hensel, also known as Frau Höss, and her husband, Lieutenant Colonel Rudolf Höss, who was the longest-serving SS commandant at Auschwitz concentration camp, were in Poland during the Holocaust. Frau Höss used her time in jail to open a sewing shop, which gave her and her fellow inmates access to high-quality, custom-made clothes, even though they were very hard to get. She broke into a storage room called Canada and brought in clothes and other luxury things that had been taken from inmates' homes before they were locked up. The British Allied troops said that they found her in an abandoned sugar mill full of the best hand-tailored clothes and furs that belonged to Auschwitz's dead. Frau Höss thought she was the most stylish person in the world, but she is actually one of the meanest. We hope you like this video, subscribe to the channel if you're a history addict, and please let us know about what civilization or time period we should talk about. Also, watch another video here.